World Overview of Philosophy. Hi everyone! Last week, we learned about the philosophy of ancient Greece till the Pericles age. Are we going to the later periods today?
I told you not to stop in front of one cage. Even as the ancient Greeks spread across the Aegean Sea and migrated to southern Italy, they respectively lived in small city-states as ever. A few philosophers have found the world, but they also did not know the existence of the outside.
Even now, the Europeans might think they are the belly world without knowing the outside.
In contrast, China is vast and open on all sides, attracting many people worldwide, but constantly threatened by outside enemies. Therefore, the Chinese may have quite a different worldview from the Europeans.
I see, the worldview of those people is also interesting. So, the next.
According to the legend, after the Great Flood in the 20th century BC, three emperors, Fuxi, Shennong, and Huangdi, established ancient China in Chongyuan, the midstream of the Yellow River. Fuxi was probably the Yunnan people, who introduced iron, and conquered Chongyuan by force. Meanwhile, the different Shennong groups came from southeast China, and began agriculture there, although they still used wooden farm tools. Huangdi was regarded as the founder of the unified Han nation.
That's just a myth.
However, it said, Fuxi invented Yi, the fundamental theory of Taoism. It is a sort of dualism, but yin and yang are not material, but just passive time places. Yi assumes Taiji as arche of the world in the background, and as it changes, yin and yang also transfer, as well as the sun moves, the shade and sunny shift. The changing of yin and yang has regularity, Tao, so we can foresee these changes, with an understanding of the Tao, like shade and sunny, night and day, or winter and summer.
In short, it means that although we don't know who made it, it was an ancient Chinese philosophy.
We should understand that yin and yang are not material, but just passive time places influenced by Taiji. Namely, the same things sometimes come into yin, and sometimes into yang, and the yin and yang reverse and never stay. In addition, yin is not necessarily bad, and yang is not necessarily good, as shade is pleasant under the harsh sunshine, and drought kills everything.
It would actually be discovered by climate observation.
Yeah, through the observation, they found a 10-year cycle, and associated it with the sun. They assumed there are 10 different suns, and these make different weather each year in turn. From here, they thought a cycle of 10 discrete numbers, called 10 gans. However, in the long term, they also found a 12-year cycle, where the influence of the sun is strong, and where it is not. They thought that this was due to the impact of Jupiter in the same 12-year cycle, and used secondarily the consecutive phases, 12 chis, to measure the strength of the sun.
They might have discovered the sunspots of the 10-year cycle. On the other hand, Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system, so I hear it shifts even the sun from the center. So, the next.
The Chinese established the first unified Shang dynasty, in the 16th century BC. It was a religious politics, based on the will of heaven, measuring the will by the cracks of a turtle's belly shell, when a torch was placed on it. It regarded the mono crack as yang, and the broken one as yin. However, to read this, requires specialized knowledge, and Yilogy was developed.
Perhaps the dynasty symbolized the earth with the turtle's belly shell, and the Taiji with the torch.
The system of divination becomes more complicated. The three yin-yang lines mean the heaven, the people, and the earth, respectively. The combination of three yin-yang lines makes the 8 trigrams: sky, ground, wind, valley, thunder, mountain, fire, and water. The principle of divination is, staying is bad, and turning is good, because too much sunny withers things, and too much shade rots things. So, to take turns, yin on yang is good, while yang on yin is bad.
It's interesting that descending yin at the top and rising yang at the bottom are rather in harmony.
However, in the 11th century BC, the Shang dynasty fell into tyranny, and the Zhou dynasty of the Western foreigners defeated it in 1046 BC. To time the revolution, the new king's younger brother, Duke of Zhou, developed more complex divination, the 64 hexagrams. They are the double trigrams of the inner and the outer, with which the diviner can forecast the relation of oneself and the opponent, or how things turn out chronologically. To get the yin-yang lines, he used not the turtle's shell more, but simply 50 wildflower stalks. In the new dynasty, he founded the eastern little state, Lu, where there is Mount Tai, to correspond with heaven.
Chinese diviners use the 50 stalks, even now. So, the next.
However, it was difficult for the Western foreign Zhou dynasty to rule the vast China. Duke of Zhou created a feudal courtesy system, Li, but the lords would not follow it. In addition, King Yu was infatuated with his mistress, and brought the country into the turmoil of state conflicts, in 771. Yilogy was no longer the monopoly of the dynasty, and each lord employed diviners. Thus, the authentic text of Yilogy, Yijing, was established in the name of Fuxi and the Duke of Zhou.
From the beginning, it would be difficult for anyone to unify and govern such a large country.
However, as long as the unity of the state had been lost, the situation could no longer be explained by Taiji alone. So, the diviners invoked their traditional natural philosophy. They thought, nature was made of 5 materials: wood, fire, mud, metal, and water. These materials have unique influences on the others, qi. wood grows fire, fire grows mud, mud grows metal, metal grows water, and water grows wood, and this positive circulation is called mutual growing. Vice versa, wood hinders mud, mud hinders water, water hinders fire, fire hinders metal, and metal hinders wood, and this negative one is called mutual hindering.
This will be a true philosophy without myth.
The 5 Qis theory went well with the Yilogy. 10 Gans were regarded as the doubling of 5 Qis by yin-yang, namely, yang wood, yang fire, yang mud, and so on. This fusion allowed the 5 Qis theory to discuss compatibility over time.
As a result, Yilogy incorporated the 5 Qis into divination.
They thought, various things are a mixture or component of these materials. Human bodies, states, and even planets have the nature of the materials and are under the influence of the relations of their materials. Therefore, when something is wrong, we should fix and arrange it with medicine or policy to compensate for the shortage or reduce the excess.
That would no longer be divination depending on heaven's will, but rather a practical philosophy, Taoism. So, the next.
LaoZi was a legendary philosopher who wrote Tao Jing and De Jing and established Taoism. The former explains the Tao, and the latter shows a good life along with the Tao. However, in fact, these texts were written by multiple anonymous scholars over a long period, so they contain contradictory thoughts.
China has too many classics whose true authors are unknown. This is probably because they are authoritarian and worship the ancients.
According to him, Tao is the natural course of things, but it is not the absolutely ruling law, so things may sometimes go off course. However, even if so, they must return to the original course. Therefore, he said, we should live along the way without vain selfishness, where things originally go.
It is similar to Buddhism.
Famous Confucius was in fact one of the Taoists too. According to the legend, he directly met LaoZi. He disliked divination based on chance, Shang Shuyi, but he also could not agree with LaoZi, who let all be in nature without doing anything. He studied Tao from Yijing as Yilogy, said Yin Yang Zhu Yun, namely, Yin Yang rules the course of things, so he analyzed situations intelligently, without divination, and sought to put things back on their proper course, through his political activities.
That was the very practical philosophy.
However, during the turmoil, Taoism also became a religion. The legend tells that, Fuxi discovered Yi, Shennong invented agriculture, and Huangdi unraveled medicine. So in common Taoism, people worship them as the 3 divine emperors, for luck, harvest, and health, at the Tao temples.
These would be the 3 major wishes of the common people, anywhere and at any time.
Following LaoZi's teachings, some tried to become holy hermits with supernatural powers, like walking on water and flying in the air. They undertook rigorous training in deep mountains, as Taoshis. However, many could perform only meaningless spells and rituals for people, as Fangshis. Furthermore, some pretended to be the well-trained Taoshis, selling dubious divination and useless medicines at high prices in markets, as Shusis. But, some of them were the true pioneers of chemistry.
A wakeboard or a glider allows us to run on water or fly in the air, or perhaps using resonance, they drew the force of nature like laser beams. So, the next.
Politics became more chaotic in the 5th century BC of the Warring States period. Lords sought eulogists as advisors, whether Shang Shuyi with divination or Yilogy by analysis. However, until then, war was only once a year during the agricultural off-season, but now, they had to fight at any time with all sides. 4 seasons and 4 directions go well with the 8 hexagrams, but not with 5 Qis. Some assigned wood, fire, metal, and water, to the east, the south, the west, and the north, or spring, summer, fall, and winter, and considered the rest mud, as the center, or the unstable transitions. However, others proposed different ways, so Yilogy became confused.
Yin, Yang, and 5 Qis were originally different systems, so it is inherently impossible to reinterpret them.
Besides eulogists, many scholars proposed to the lords how to win and unify China. They were called the various masters of 100 schools. Qi, which established a new dynasty in the 4th century BC, seeking to gain hegemony over China, invited many scholars and encouraged them to conduct research and discussion. It is called the Jixia Academy.
It would be the oldest university in the world.
Mencius of the Confucianist Lu school also visited there and promoted himself arrogantly. However, if one got involved in politics, one would get caught up in the politicians' intentions and conflicts, and be tossed about and exhausted, and one's life may even be put at risk. Therefore, the more talented a scholar was, the more he distanced himself from politics, and lived in seclusion, as Yunshis. Mencius's fellow Confucianist, Zhuangzi, also converted to Taoism, insisted on Wu Wei Ziran, and retired to the life of the ordinary people.
In those days, no matter how much a lord liked one became embroiled in the fight between the powerful generals within the country, and one could easily be assassinated.
Zhou Yan also learned Confucianism at the Jixia Academy, and studied history, with the theories of Confucius Yin Yang Zhu Yun, adding his Wu Deji Yun. He placed mud in the center, and considered wood and fire to be yang, while metal and water to be yin, and he thought, dynasties transfer from mud trust, wood humanity, metal justice, fire wisdom, water decorum, to the first again, because the latter superior to the former.
Yin Yang among 5 keys of Taoism, was combined with Confucian virtues. So, the next.
Legalism branched off from Confucianism, and advocated rewards and punishments. The Qin dynasty adopted it, and attracted many talented people, unifying China in 221 BC. The Confucianists criticized the Qin for disrespecting the traditional family system, so the Qin dynasty eliminated them. However, bureaucrats, who had been promoted by legalism, overtook the dynasty, and the Qin was defeated by the Han dynasty in 206 BC.
History is always ironic.
The Han appointed imperial relatives, even to local government positions, which revived the traditional family system, so that the Confucianists played an active role again, as their ritual masters. However, influenced by Taoism, the Han instead adopted Laoism, leaving things in the field, following the legend of Di and LaoZi's policy.
He would be the pioneer of the modern symbolic kingdom policy, saying king reigns but does not govern.
Dr. Dong Zhongshu was a Confucianist, and made Confucianism the national school in 136 BC. He studied the Annals Junqiu, written by Confucius, and thought with Zhou Wu Daji Yun, that good or bad politics are reflected in heavenly grace and disasters. This historical critique of politics angered the emperor, and Dong was demoted. However, after that, many occult references of Confucian classics, Chen Wei, were produced.
Confucius would initially be a Taoist. Chen Wei would make Confucianism turn to worshipping Confucius as a new religion.
Chen Wei, or Confucian Taoism, influenced strong. Based on it, the Han dynasty was defeated in 8 CE, but with it, Emperor Guangwu also restored the Eastern Han dynasty in 25 CE. The official common doctrine of Confucianism of 79 CE, by Hutong, also accepted Dr. Dong's Wu Chang, namely 5 morals: humanity, justice, decorum, wisdom, and trust.
Thus, 5 keys of Taoism also became one of the cores of Confucianism. So, the next.
While bureaucrats focused on Chen Wei, eunuchs and clansmen took over power. Thus, politics became unstable, and the plague spread widely, so a legendary Tao Shi over 100 years old, Ganji, came down from the mountains, with a holy book, Taipin Qingling Shu, to the lower Yangtze River. The book tells in a dialogue, about how to heal humans and states. Zhangju and Luiyang, a fishy Shusi, got the book, made people drink holy water, repent of their vices, and organized a religious order, Taipingism.
Zhangju must have been up to something.
Also inspired by Taoism, Zhangxiu of West China found Wudanmiism. As its name suggests, he collected 5 buckets of rice from the people, and aimed to build a new religious state. When Zhangju of Taipingism started the Yellow Turban Rebellion from the east in 184, Zhangxiu of Wudanmiism also rose in response from the west. However, the rebellion was soon put down. Zhanglu of the southeast killed his guru Zhangjiu, took over the Wudanmiism order, and instead worshipped his grandfather, a legendary Tao Shi, Zhanling, as a Tianxi, as if Zhanling founded Wudanmiism.
After all, only a cunning man like Zhang Lu survived and took all.
Confucian Taoists, Heian and Wangbi, began Xian Shui. They regarded Yijing as the Confucian Bible, and LaoZi and Zhuangzi as its commentaries. They thought, the arche of the world was nothing, and it successively produced everything. Therefore, everything follows the natural Tao, so we also should not do any additional things, and better keep in harmony with the existing.
That seems like a typical bureaucratic, non-confrontational way. So, the next.
The Eastern Han dynasty fell in 220, and the 3 kingdoms period of Wei, Wu, and Shu took place. The unification of Jin did not last long, and in the northern half, there were the 5 barbarians and 16 kingdoms of northern Wei, northern Qi, and northern Zhou, while in the southern half, there were Song, Qi, Liang, and Chen. In addition, the Wudanmi state moved to the Longhu Mountain in southeast China, keeping its independence too.
Too complicated.
In this turmoil, people turned to Taoism and newly imported Buddhism. Hua Tuo of Wei developed Huangdi's medicine, and performed even surgery with anesthesia. Gexian of Shu also studied medicine, but aimed to invent an elixir to become an immortal holy hermit. In contrast, Wei Huakun of Wei founded the Shangqing school in the south of Luiyang in 299. She invented the method to become a holy hermit through meditation of gods in one's own body, without elixir, like Indian yoga and Eso Buddhism, and it was accepted by bureaucrats who would avoid any worldly trouble.
Everyone would want to run away from such a confusing age.
Gahong of Jin, a relative of Gexian, took over Xian's studies of elixir, and wrote Bao Puzi, the guidebook to becoming a holy hermit. Gechaofu, a descendant of the family, created the Lingbao school, as a mixture of Taoism and Buddhism. They worshipped the personified Tao, Lingbao Taojun, but regarded it as a reincarnating way of 5 levels: hell, ghost, animal, human, and deity, by recombination of yin-yang.
A personified god would be easier to worship.
However, popular Taoism and Buddhism had armed temples, and might rebel, so the emperors feared them. Therefore, a Tao Shi, Cao Qianji, criticized them and founded Neo-Taoism. He worshipped LaoZi as the main deity, Tai Shang Laojun, forbade collecting religious taxes, eliminated the immorality excusing intercourse of yin-yang, eradicated cheap witchcraft of Fang Shis, and instead imposed strict discipline on people. Thus, Neo-Taoism was adopted by Northern Wei as the national religion in 442.
The Wudami state must have been extremely corrupt.
In opposition to those, Tao Hongjing of Liang in South China learned the Shangqing school and systematized various gods and holy hermits as polytheism, like Neo-Buddhism. He said here, Yuan Shi Tianzun, that personalized the world RK over Lingbao Taojun and Taishang Laojun, and regarded them as the main deities, Sansheng.
Where had Fuxi Shenlong and Huangdi gone? So, the next.
The founder of the Sui dynasty, Yang Jian, was born in a Buddhist temple and believed in Buddhism, but the founder of the Tang, Li Yuan, abolished Buddhism and introduced the Confucian-based imperial examination to promote bureaucrats. Still, the Confucian bureaucrats abused their positions, only to enrich themselves.
It would have been just because Confucius would be less likely to rebel than Buddhists and Taoists.
However, the Tang imperial family considered themselves descendants of LaoZi, and the imperial rituals were also in Taoist style. Tao Shis lived in the Tao temple, Sanqing Dian of the imperial court, and advised the emperors about even politics. The imperial examinations added a Taoist course too. As society became more stable, people sought health and eternal life, and alchemic Fan Shis peddled dubious elixirs. Even bureaucrats and emperors lost their lives to such elixirs.
With enough time and money, people spend them on stupid things.
An imperial Tao Shi, Cheng Xianying, was familiar with Buddhism, and founded the metaphysics of Tao, the Changxuan school. Influenced by Nagarjuna's Madhyarmika school, which thought reality is empty, he interpreted LaoZi's definition of Tao, the arche of the world and everything, is the mystery of mystery. According to it, the differences between various things are just whether they are given their respective names, even life and death. Therefore, he did not seek immortality anymore, but rather a change in consciousness for mind freedom, like Zen Buddhism.
Taoism finally became an authentic philosophy.
Thus, Taoism gained political and theoretical superiority over Buddhism, and encouraged the emperors to suppress Buddhism. However, as the Tang dynasty declined, Taoism also weakened. The emperors of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms also turned to Taoism, but could not prolong their dynasties.